One of the qualifications of being an adult is getting a government-issued valid ID. However, getting valid IDs is very hard here in the Philippines. Imagine, kukuha ka ng valid ID, pero yung institution na pagkukuhanan mo ng valid ID na yun also requires another valid ID for it to be issued. Like, where should we begin? Anyways, in this video, I'm going to discuss the process of getting one of the easiest valid ID that anyone could get, any Filipino can get, even if you are just a student like me with just a few requirements, and that is the Postal ID. I'm gonna reflect. Postal ID. So, if you are thinking of getting a Postal ID as your very first valid government-issued ID, then please keep on watching. Here's how I structured this video. First, I will define what is a Postal ID and the perks and the advantages of having this kind of ID. Second, I will also discuss where you should apply for a Postal ID and the requirements that you should submit when applying for this type of ID. Third, I will also discuss the fees involved sa pagpapagawa ng valid ID na ito, like your delivery fee, the VAT, and all. And finally, I will also include my experiences in getting my own ID, starting from my application to the postal office, to the picture taking, and the receiving of the actual ID. Postal ID is a government-issued ID that is obtained from the Philippine Postal Corporation. As of the moment, the Philippine Postal Corporation is issuing an improved Postal ID. Kasi before, there was a basic Postal ID, and now, this basic Postal ID is now upgraded to an improved Postal ID, which is said to be equipped with features that aren't typical of an ID card, and it is expected to meet today's challenges on identity fraud and falsification of documents. And that also, of course, is based on the post from the PhilPost website. So they claim that this certain type of ID is more secured, not prone to identity fraud or falsification, unlike the basic Postal ID. So they are encouraging everyone to get the improved Postal ID or upgrade their basic Postal ID to an improved one. Then this improved Postal ID is valid for 3 years for Filipinos and also for foreign residents with the SRRV or the Special Retirees Resident Visa. However, para dun sa mga foreigners without the SRRV, it will only be valid for 1 year. So basically, 3 years for Filipinos and foreigners with SRRV and 1 year lang for other foreigners. So during these years, during these durations, like for 3 years or 1 year, you can use your improved Postal ID to basically anything that requires a valid government ID. I personally use my Postal ID to verify my e-wallets, like my GCash, Paymaya, PayPal. I use them, so basically fully verified na ako sa 3 e-wallets ko. I also use my Postal ID to open digital banks like yung CIMB, ING, and Como. So if you're familiar with those digital banks, yeah, I use my Postal ID to open up an account for those banks. And aside from for verification purposes or for anything that requires a valid government ID, the Philippine Postal ID is also an accepted valid ID for Philippine passport application based on the list of acceptable valid IDs posted by the Office of Consular Affairs sa DFA, although I haven't tried that yet for that purpose. Okay, James, so gets ko na kung anong Postal ID and I'm now aware of the perks and advantages of having this type of card. So now, where do I apply? Good question. In applying for a Postal ID, you may apply and submit the required documents to any post office since it is a Postal ID. So sa post office tayo mag-apply. So once you submitted the requirements and the application form sa post office, these documents will be screened by the staff sa postal office, and once approved, you will go to the nearest ID capture station to be photographed and fingerprinted. Usually kasi, the postal office that you will go to is not the ID capture station. So you have to go to another area where they basically issue the ID and photograph you. Hiwalay pa siya dun sa mismong postal office. So if you are not aware of the postal office near you, you can just search up sa Google, postal office near me, tapos alabas na yun. And if you don't want to do that, you can basically just ask around sa neighborhood nyo kung nasa yung postal office, because probably they are aware of where it is. For the requirements, here are the documents that must be submitted during the application. So take note that you should bring the original copy and a photocopy of these documents. So dalawa, original copy and photocopy. So first document is 2 copies of duly accomplished PID application form. So PID application form or postal ID application form ay available sa nearest post office nyo. So once you already know where is the postal office near you, you can basically ask for a copy of the application form, tapos bibigyan lang nila yun sa inyo for free. Or if you don't want to go to the nearby postal office, you can just download it from the PhilPost website. But again, you don't have to search it up because I already included the link in the description box below. See, I'm making your life easier here. Go, like ka, subscribe. So aside from the PID application form, you are also required to submit any proof of identity. So you are required to submit any one of the following documents. So you can submit your birth certificate issued by the NSO or local civil registry, your GSIS or SSS UMID card, your valid driver's license, or your valid passport. It must also be noted na kung ikaw ay isang married female, you must bring your marriage certificate with you para ma-validate nila yung change nung surname mo from your birth document. If you don't have those 4 documents, if you don't have the birth certificate, if you don't have the UMID card, the driver's license, and the passport, you can submit any 2 of the following documents. And at least one of these 2 alternatives must have your photo and must have your signature. So here are the list of the alternative requirements if you don't have the 4 major requirements. See, this is the reason why it is very easy to apply for a postal ID, because kahit wala ka ng mga primary documents that you must submit, you can still resort to an alternative. So we are now done with the 2 requirements. First is the PID application form, and second is the proof of identity. Your last requirement is to submit a proof of address. So submit any one of the following. You may submit a barangay certificate of residency issued within 3 months prior to the PID application. You may also submit a certified true copy of lists or a certified true copy of titles issued by the Land Registration Authority or the LRA, a certified true copy of real estate tax receipt, a bank statement, credit card statement, school billing statement of any of your utility bills, which includes your cable, your electric, your internet, your landline, telephone, or water. So yun, those are the documents for your proof of address. So we already discussed what is a postal ID and the benefits of having this type of ID. We also discussed the location of where you should apply for a postal ID and the requirements involved when you are going to apply. Now, I'm going to enumerate the fees involved when you are going to apply for it. Basically, the postal ID fee is 504 pesos. So, included na dun yung delivery fee and your VAT, yung value-added tax, 12% value-added tax. For the breakdown, the postal ID card plus the delivery fee costs 450 pesos. And the value-added tax, which is 12%, is equal to 54 pesos, giving us a total of 504 pesos. So yun lang yung babayaran nyo, 504 pesos. No more, no less. So aside from the 504 pesos, which is just the regular fee for a postal ID, there is also a rush processing, which costs 650 pesos naman. So 504 for regular, 650 pesos for rush postal ID processing. And so we are now done with the technicalities about the application of postal ID. Now, I'm going to share my experiences when I applied for my very first government-issued ID as a student. Back in the parang December of 2020, I realized how important having a valid ID is, especially as a young adult, as a 21-year-old college student, kasi it is really useful for verification. And so, I had no clue where to apply at first kasi nga, lahat ng applyan ko na institutions to get a valid ID also requires another valid ID. So yeah, I don't know where to start until someone introduced me to Postal ID na madali lang daw mag-apply doon and all. So I followed her advice. And yeah, I searched up for requirements and now I have my own. So, yun talaga yung start kasi parang I needed valid IDs to verify my e-wallets kasi nga diba I also own a small business and I need to have a valid ID for my account to be verified. That was the push that I needed to really apply for a postal ID as soon as possible. And when I was accomplishing the requirements or the documents needed for my application, yung application form, I went to the nearest postal office because I also have to ask questions for verification about the process and all. So I went to the nearby postal office para ma-accommodate ako ng mga staffs doon. And yun, easy lang naman yung pagkuha ng application form. You just have to ask yung kung sino yung tao doon and may bibigay sila sa inyo na form. I fill out the forms and pina-photocopy ko. And then, tinago ko muna because hindi ko pa nga kompleto yung requirements ko when I went to the postal office. I already have an NSO birth certificate, so check ko na ako dun sa proof of identity, check na rin ako dun sa accomplish application form. Yung kulang ko na lang is proof of address. The document that I chose for my proof of address was a barangay certificate of residency. You can easily get it from the barangay captain. So punta ka lang sa office ng captain nyo sa barangay nyo and the captain will issue a certificate. I did not pay for anything for that certificate, but I don't know lang sa ibang barangays if they ask for a certain fee for that, but I did not pay anything for that. So yun, I already completed my requirements. I have my accomplished application form, I have my birth certificate, and I have my barangay certificate. So I went to the postal office, dun sa pinagkuhanan ko ng PID application form na yun, and I submitted their requirements. They asked me to photocopy the documents that I have. So nagpa-photocopy ako doon ng 3 copies. Isa for them, isa for the ID capturing station, and isa for me. So upon photocopying, upon submitting a copy of my documents to the postal office, they asked me to pay for 504 pesos. So doon na ako nagbayad sa postal office and they issued me a receipt. When I was already issued a receipt, at the same day I went to the ID capturing station, which is on a nearby city. So I live in Mangaldan, Pangasinan. Then yung capturing station, yung ID capturing station is in Dagupan City. So, nearby lang siya. I went to the postal office in Dagupan because doon nga daw nagpipicture ng ID. I never really experienced any trouble nung nagpa-ID picture ako because nung pagdarating ko nung postal ID, sakto, walang pila. Like, ako pa lang yun nandun. And around around after lunch na yun. So, mga 12:30, 1, ganun. Ayun lang. So, parang lang din. Picture ID lang sa school. Pipicturean ka lang nila. Smile. Then, they will get your fingerprint. Ganyan. And after getting your fingerprint, they will encode your information. So, you will give them the application form that you signed, yung other copy. And they will also ask for the receipt of payment. And so, once you already submitted that, once you already had your picture taken, your fingerprint printed, you're now ready to go. You just have to wait actually. Yung time na sinabi sa akin ay I should wait for 1.5 months, but I received it 2 days after a month. I applied last February 8, 2021. I received it around March 10 or 11, 2021. Yun lang na may experience ko with the postal ID. I will check if they will accept the postal ID once I apply for a passport. I don't know yet kung kailan, but I'll apply for it soon, I guess. So yeah, those are just my experiences when applying for my very first government-issued ID. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope na it became clear to you how you can apply for a government-issued ID, specifically the postal ID. If I was able to help you, if I was able to answer any of your questions in mine, please give this video a thumbs up. You can also leave a comment if you find this video very helpful. I will really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.